Book 15 of 2020 was The Witch of the Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I said that different to how I said it before. This book was nominated for book club. I did actually vote for it. It sounded alright, and I'd heard of the Netflix series and everyone had said that it was really good, although I haven't watched it. And so I thought, you know, maybe it'll be worth a read. Fantasy genre is not really my bag usually, for the reasons that I will explain. I think that Sapkowski can be credited for the creation of The Witcher as a character, because he's quite a complex character. It's funny actually, because during book club discussion there was a comment made about how they didn't really know much about his character, and I was thinking that's really odd, because the character is kind of, the way that they create witches mean that they have a certain personality, because, you know, they don't experience emotion in the same way because they've gone through complete trauma in their childhood. And I think that the character of the Witcher is quite dry in his sense of humour, and so it's a little bit difficult, I guess, for some people to realise that it's supposed to be like, I actually think that I have quite a few similarities with the character, because I'm quite dry when I say things, and I say things that are actually meant to be funny, but people don't get that they're meant to be funny. And I think that that's what the case is with The Witcher, which is why I kind of like the character. There's also like a cornucopia world of mythological creatures from around the world that I actually quite liked. So there was the chimera from Greece, there's the jinns from like Asia. There's quite a few different kind of like, you know, characters that are prominent in mythology, in various different mythologies around the world that were kind of coming up. And so I thought that was quite a nice kind of eclectic mix of around the world mythology. And there was obviously some new ones made up as well, or I assume that they're made up. But the way that the book is because it's fantasy, and it's kind of like medieval fantasy. It's kind of got that trope where it's set in a medieval kind of time, and the roles of the men and women are kind of similar to medieval times. So it's quite good in the sense that it kind of elicits the thought of whether or not these monsters are actually monsters, or if the human beings are actually the monsters, because they're requiring the Witcher to go and kill these monsters. So it kind of prompts that kind of thought process. But unfortunately, the representation of women is severely lacking, and obviously I recognise that this is because it's using this medieval trope, and in medieval times women didn't have any kind of representation. They were kind of like property of men, but unfortunately with this book it was kind of done a little bit too much, so that it became like misogynistic when it didn't necessarily need to be. And I get that that is the genre, and that a lot of books in the fantasy genre are like this. For example, there's always an over-sexualisation of women, and they are seen as kind of sexual objects, which happens in this one too. So for example, there's kind of like this virginal female character who doesn't speak, you know, perfect, and she is kind of like the witch's sexual gratification object. And it's kind of like, so, you know, a woman's purpose is to not speak and to have sex with a man, basically, according to this representation. And then there is kind of like a representation of a woman. So that there's other representations of women. So for example, there's kind of like a maternal representation of the woman that's in the temple, but yet she's still at the behest of the men, and the soldiers that have kind of like the power in the area, which, you know, it's medieval, I get that, that's fine. But then the other character that I had a problem with was that the only woman in it that has any power has to relinquish her femininity by giving up her ability to have children. And she's also kind of said to be like a hunchback and to be really ugly, but it's kind of masked because she's powerful. And it's kind of like, in order to be a powerful woman, you have to not really be a female, because you've had to give up your womanhood, because this is apparently what makes you a woman. You know, your ability to have children. You know, what are you if you can't have children? And also you have to be ugly. So I just thought that this was like really kind of offensive actually. When I was reading it, I was just like, are you for real? But I get that this is the fantasy genre, and I get, you know, like a lot of men like the fantasy genre, and I don't think they kind of realise how misogynistic it is. And it's kind of like playing into that kind of that dialogue where it's never kind of questioned. There was actually a comment made by someone at the book club, which was where they'd kind of said that the author was almost like giving a nod to the fact that these roles were quite misogynistic, because they'd given like the women a little bit more power than what they would normally have in this medieval trope. So I kind of respected that a little bit, but I kind of just thought, just the way that it's written, it's like the women are sexualized, and they're kind of like you know, there for the benefit of the male characters, and they don't really have their own voice unless they give something up, or unless they become more masculine. So I just thought it was a bit ridiculous because of that. And also the writing was quite difficult to get through, particularly because, and I don't know if this is perhaps a translation issue, because a lot of books that we've read that are translated suffer from this, but I don't think you can really like say that it's because of this, because the issue is it was repetition of certain words, and I don't think that that's down to translation. So it's got a real penchant for semicircles. He says semicircles all the time, and lilacs and gooseberries were repeated, you know, numerous times on one paragraph, ridiculously. And I recognise that maybe he's trying to show that it's kind of an obsession with it, but you know, it reminded me of, you know, in Charlie's Angels, where that character like sniffs the hair. It was kind of like that. It was a bit weird. So I was a bit like, And then the other issue that I had as well was the way that the book was framed. So this is kind of a collection of short stories, which I didn't actually realise when I was first starting to read it. And I was kind of reading it, and I don't really read the titles of chapters. Like, I just don't bother. I just kind of, you know, carry on reading. Like, I don't really care what the chapters are called. And so I wasn't reading them. And so I didn't realise that the stories weren't in sequential order, because what was actually happening was that some of the chapters were The Witcher in the present time, and then the other chapters were in kind of like flashing back to things that had happened, and the thread, if you will, was the situation where they were in the present time. So I didn't realise this until halfway through, so I was quite confused in the beginning, and then when I got halfway through and realised that that's what it was, it lost all forward momentum, because I was like, well, they're just in this present time and they're just flashing back a few times, so it kind of like lost all kind of interest for me, so I didn't really want to carry on reading, so it was quite difficult to get through. So, you know, it was okay, but I wouldn't recommend it. I only gave it 2 stars.